My name is Mark Oxer, and you are watching or listening to the Zen Disc Golf Podcast.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Zen Disc Golf Podcast. I am your host, Patrick McCormick, author of Zen and the Art of Disc Golf, Discs and Zen, and Disc Golf Strategies and Tactics. If you're hearing some ambient noise and you're not tuning into the video, I apologize about that, but we are filming in my backyard. It was just such a beautiful day out here. I thought I'd mix it up and kind of give you all a picture of my little practice basket here. I have got a great show for you today. I have Mark Oxer on the show, and his resume is so extensive and complete, I had to make some notes on a sticky note just to tell you exactly some of the things, some of his accolades. He's a chartered professional coach. He's a member of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association. He has a master's in strength conditioning, and he's run for a PDGA board position. In addition to that, he's attempted a world record for the number of courses played in 1 year. You're gonna love this show. Ladies and gentlemen, I present you Mark Oxer. Mark, your resume, as we were just discussing before the show, is quite amazing, and you impressed me even more before the theme music ran. I'm a little bit blown away. I'm not sure where to start, but I know that a lot of my listeners probably don't know too much about you, and I didn't know too much about you, but like I said, you're blown away. But since they may not know much, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Let's start there, and then we'll see where we go with this.
Yeah, so I'll start with my PDJ number, 112340. So I only started playing the game a couple of years ago, so 2018, I believe. I had incurred a pretty traumatic knee injury and was looking for something where I could still participate in sport. And I found disc golf. And I think that goes along with a lot of the stories that I've heard in the last few years of being able to meet a lot of cool people throughout the sport. It ties to a lot of people who have come to disc golf for, how do I want to describe that? Sort of a positive benefit, whether that be mental health, physical health, social health, that a lot of people have turned to disc golf and really found a positive community there. So that's kind of how I came to the sport as well. I've been playing for, like I said, since 2018. I've played around 150 courses now since then.
Wow.
In 7 different countries, 7 or 9. I'll recount it, but it's I've got a chance to travel. I think I've played in, again, 7 or 9 different states in the United States, and then several Canadian provinces as well. So yeah, that's sort of my background for the sport. I did run for a PDGA board position in the last election and finished 7th place, got about 10% of the votes. I was pretty happy with that. I mean, obviously I would like to have been elected, but I was pretty happy with how that went. And then just really looking to continue to do anything I can to make the sport more awesome for those people who are interested in participating in it.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a whole lot. And I mean, your background, even prior to disc golf, is pretty amazing. I got down that you're a chartered professional coach, a member of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association.
Yeah.
So we get to talk a little bit about Zen and the Art of Disc Golf and where it was right and where it was wrong. And then, but you've got that going on for you. You've got some other little odds and ends. You got some board gaming going on for you. You got a couple, which I'd love to talk about that. We've got a couple books that you've written. I mean, we're just all over the place. So why don't we start? I know you just told me about your knee. Who took you out to the course, or how did you discover the course or disc golf in general?
So let me think about this now. It'd be 2003, I believe. A buddy of mine, there was 4 of us living in a house together in Winnipeg. And he was like, hey, you want to come out and play some disc golf with me? And he had a fairly substantial stack of discs. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
As
And
we
so,
tend to do.
yeah, as we tend to do is right. I oh man. Uh, so I went out with him. He took me out to Kilcona Park, which is in Winnipeg, and played around with him. And I was like, oh yeah, that was pretty fun. I mean, I had a little bit of experience with Ultimate at that point in time, so I had a reasonable understanding of how to throw a disc. But as we know, golf discs are different than the Ultra Star, and it just didn't fly quite the same. I had the same problem that most beginners probably do: out of the hand, hyzer.
Pop up, fade left.
Nose up because of Ultimate playing, right? And nose up, and then just dumps to the left, right? And I'm like, oh, and then he's throwing, and you're like, I don't get this. Like, it's crazy, right? So that was my introduction to disc golf. I played one round in 2003, and then that was kind of the end of it until about 2012. I moved to Alberta. I was living in a rural community in Alberta, and there was a course across the street from me, 9-hole course across the street. And I was just like, you know what? Let's give this a shot. So I went online and looked up where I could buy discs in Calgary, drove into Calgary, and was, again, maybe did the same mistake that some other people have done. I wanted the fastest disc with the most glide.
Oh yeah.
So, and then I was trying to figure out, like, well, if it's a -2 and then a 2, that's going to make a 0, so it's going to fly dead straight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I bought an Innova Groove as my first driver.
You know, that's one of the most hated discs on the market, but I don't hate it. I never have hated the Groove, and I've been so chastised about it. I don't carry one anymore, but I used to love it back in the day. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. So I actually, so I currently, if I show, I'm throwing Discmania mostly, pretty much the entirety of my bag, with the exception of one disc right now, is Discmania. And the one disc that is not is a Rask.
Nice.
Which is similar to the Groove, right? So,
yeah, and we both wore our Discmania shirts. We did not coordinate. It just sort of happened that way.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I had an Innova Groove and an AVR, and I mean, it was good, but it wasn't great. So I didn't play a whole lot. In 2016, I moved back to Manitoba, and I incurred a knee injury playing recreational softball. I was in center field trying to catch a pop fly. Cleat got the ground funny and tore my knee apart. Went through surgery and rehab and what have you, and it's still a problem, but it's better than what it was. But anyways, I had a buddy just say, hey, do you want to go play some disc golf at Kilcona Park again? And so I was like, okay. So took the discs and went out and played, and I think it was like a shot of +32 or something like that on 18 holes from the short tees.
Good round, yeah. Very nice. Yeah.
But it was just one of those things where it was like a beautiful day out, and we're like, oh man, that was really fun. I wonder if there's like how we would do, like, let's track our progress over the summertime. Well, that lasted until the next day, and I was like, hey, you want to go play disc golf again?
Oh yeah. Don't you hear them chains?
and then it's just, again, it was like, hey, you want to go play disc golf again?
Definitely.
And then so we got a couple other buddies, and we're like, hey, you want to come play disc golf? And they're like, I guess, like, what, you guys seem to be enjoying this. And we're like, so they bring their Ultra Star and play, and then handed them like a Sidewinder or like a Cobra, Shark, Mako 3, like some of those kind of discs to start with. And I don't know, it kind of grew, and downloaded UDisc, and yeah, we just started really playing like a lot. I entered my first tournament in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, and as the rec division, and I got second place in my first tournament in the rec. We were tied after 2 rounds, and then I won a playoff hole. So that was sort of my introduction to disc golf as a tournament player, and that was pretty fun. And then from there, it was just like, let's play more disc golf.
So let me ask you, I was talking to Zoe Andike about this. What was it? Was it ringing the chains that kept bringing you back, or chasing that perfect flight? Which was it?
Oh man, I've thought about this question so many times, and when I talk to new players, I ask them that same thing. I'm like,
Really?
What is it? Is it, yeah? And I ask other players. Like, I've introduced a fair number of people to the game, I would say, And I asked them those same questions. I'm like, what is it? Because it's the same thing. I got a buddy at home. I say home. I say I have a friend in Winnipeg. I'll say that. I kind of refer to Manitoba as home because that's where I grew up. But I gave him a starter pack for Christmas last year, and he didn't really get out and play too much. And then this past sort of when COVID hit, he was like, "Hey, interested in like going out and playing some of this disc golf stuff?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we went out and played. And he's just like, I gotta buy more discs. I gotta buy more discs. Can we go play? Let's go play. Let's go play. I gotta buy more discs. And so his son is now into it. He's introducing his other kids to it. He's starting to introduce other friends in the group to it. And it's just like, it's been really good. And I've asked him that question, like, what is it? And is it the chains that like, and I think it is, I think it's a not, I don't know if you can attribute to necessarily just one thing, because there is that time where like when you release the disc and you get that flight and it just flies so perfect, you're like, oh yeah, I want to do that again.
There's so many dopamine drives in disc golf. It's
Oh my
unreal.
gosh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. But generally for some people it's hitting them chains and hearing them ring, and other people it is chasing that flight. It's definitely not hitting the trees. That's not what brings people out.
No, not at all. I think for me it's that chase of perfection. I think that's really what for me it is that like I want to birdie. I want to be able to know that I can birdie every hole. And there's a couple of holes back in Manitoba, like a course that I've played. I think I've played 120, somewhere between 120 and 150 rounds. Wow. On Kilkona, on that Kilkona Park specifically. And there's 2 holes that I haven't birdied, and it just is like that's like I want to be able to do that. I know that there's a disc golf club in Saskatchewan that they actually make birdie tags for every season, and so as you get a birdie on that hole, you can punch the tag out, and so yeah, so you can try to. The goal for the season is to try to punch all the holes.
Do you know what's interesting about that? I learned from, I want to say it was Scott Stokely. He was telling me that Steady Ed, the original, the disc golf godfather, his original intention on courses was that anybody could make a birdie on every hole, and how much the sport has evolved. Because now we have, par 4s and par 5s, but back then it was like, he wanted you to be able to make a putt from your second shot. And that was his idea of building a course. But man, course, and we're going to talk about disc golf park, I guess, in a little while, but how it's changed for development of disc golf courses to, because of basket technology, because of disc technology, and because of general athleticism. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's just a really neat thing. It just popped in my head.
For sure, yeah.
So a long time ago, I'm assuming a long time ago before disc golf, you were well, let me just say this. I've already figured out you're a passionate guy. And anything that this is kind of what I've learned about you already. Anything you get into, you jump in both feet and you're ready to go. Yeah. And you just strike me as a very passionate guy. But right before before disc golf, you were already doing like coaching, strength coaching, and okay.
Yeah.
And sports psychology. How did you get involved in all of that?
So I actually, I'll see if I can give you the Coles Notes version here, but both sides of my family doesn't have great history of health. And so I actually went to university for kinesiology because I wanted to beat my family genetics. That was my goal, is that I'm going to learn about health and fitness so that I can beat my family genetics.
That's awesome.
And so while I was in university, there was an ad for, very few people know this actually, so this is going to be news to a lot of people. There was an ad for a Team Canada head coach for soccer. And so that was a sport that I really was passionate about. Both my parents are from England, and I played it at a reasonable level as well. And so I was really passionate about it. And I was like, I would love to be a Team Canada soccer coach one day. So I actually cut that newspaper article out and kept it in my wallet during my time in university. It's like, this is why I'm in university. This is why I got to write it, this paper, and get an A on this paper, because I want to be a coach for Team Canada someday.
Kind of like that whole secret dream board kind of thing.
Absolutely. So to end that part of the story, I never became a Team Canada coach, or to now I haven't become a Team Canada coach in the soccer. I have been a Team Canada coach in another sport, but not in the sport of soccer. And so that really sort of motivated my journey along through university. I was able to get connected through a coach who had played and coached professionally in Europe, and he had moved to Manitoba. And so I was able to get connected to him and mentor from him. I took personal training certifications because that's sort of tied to kinesiology, health, fitness type stuff. Graduated university and was going to go out and change the world to be the greatest personal trainer that anybody had ever seen. And I got a real rude awakening because I realized that it doesn't matter how much I know about exercise. The biggest part of your job as a personal trainer is actually a counselor. And so I tell this story. I have actually now had the privilege of being literally in the exact same classroom that I was a student in that I got to be the instructor for. So I spent years as an instructor at university as well. And so it was really fun to be back in the same classroom. So I've shared this story with the students that I was taught at university. And I said, so one of the first things that ever happened to me as a trainer is I got a job at a sort of a global gym where people can randomly sign up and they get assigned to you as a trainer. And so I meet this person. He's like, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. And the reason I'm here to see you is because my wife is cheating on me and I want to get in better shape so I can cheat on her.
Whoa.
And I was like, nobody told me how to deal with this.
Holy moly.
So,
Right.
I mean, like, I can tell you exercises, but I don't like, and so there's been several stories that I had over the years. I had a gentleman that really just wanted to move forward in his health, but had other things going on in his life. And we actually spent most of our training sessions just walking a track together and talking. And he got to get some physical exercise, but then it was just to be able to for him to be able to express what's going on and have a conversation. And so one of the things that I tried to instill in my students was that you really need to have an understanding sort of psychology as if you want to be good as a coach and as a strength conditioning or personal trainer. So I had the opportunity to go back to university. I mean, everybody has the opportunity. I chose to go back to university, and I learned from one of the best sports psychologists that Canada's ever had. His name's Cal Botterill. He's been to multiple Olympics as a Canadian sports psychology. And so I got to learn a lot from him during my time as a student in the psychology classes with him. I specifically targeted his classes to take psychology from him. And yeah, so I moved, sort of continued down that road. I got a job as a college coach in the sport of soccer. After a few years of that, wanted to do further education. So I went to the motherland, I guess. I moved to England to do a master's degree in strength conditioning. And because I really wanted to be a part of the soccer culture over there. So I was attending University of Worcester in England, working on a master's of strength conditioning and working as the head goalkeeper coach for the academy there. And that was really fascinating to be able to connect with scouts from, name it, like Man City, Man United, Liverpool, all the big scouts were coming to check out our goalkeepers and stuff. So that was really cool to be able to liaison with some of them. The England women's national team was one of the teams that trained at our facility. From there, I got to move on to coaching, again, soccer in Canada at the collegiate level, and then transitioned from coaching soccer because I was doing strength and conditioning with my teams primarily. I was coaching men's and women's soccer at the collegiate level at the time. Transitioned from that to being a strength conditioning coach for all the teams within the college. And that required me to step away from being a coach for just soccer and moved and really sort of focused my specialization into strength conditioning, which then sort of transitioned me into various different sort of niches within strength conditioning. So I've had an opportunity to work with CrossFit athletes over the years, but to sort of tie back to that Team Canada piece, I've been named a head coach for Team Canada within the sport of powerlifting and had the privilege to represent the country at international events. And so that's been pretty exciting. And yeah, so that's sort of the coaching journey that I've had, and then really just wanting to build on some of those psychology pieces that I had picked up from my university classes to be a member, so I could be a accredited member with the Canadian Sports Psychology Association, because it's not just about a really good physical body, as obviously you would know, writing a book about it.
Yeah,
There's a lot of what happens up here, right? So
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Do you know Seth Muncie?
I know who he is. We've had a couple of like conversations, like text conversations or email conversations back a couple of years ago. Um, I've never met him, but I've had multiple people be like, "You got to meet Seth. You got to meet Seth. You got to meet Seth," and I would love to meet him one day.
I think
So,
what we should do, because I'm developing a relationship with Seth, I think we need to bring both of you guys on one podcast and me just sit back and just throw out some keywords and let you guys just go back and forth.
oh, I'd love
Well,
it.
you're
I'd love it.
yeah, and I just because, very similar backgrounds and similar outlooks, it sounds like,
Yeah.
but wow. So now you're bringing all of this to disc golf in some way, shape, or form. I assume that you're still working or coaching and as a profession
Yeah.
currently.
So it looks a little bit differently right now. It's transitioned into primarily because of COVID. It's transitioned to do more online education, and so I've partnered up with two other gentlemen who have quite extensive coaching backgrounds in their own right, and we formed an online education business that is specifically directed towards coach and athlete education. We have so you mentioned this, I think, in your introduction, that I'm a chartered professional coach. That comes through the Coaching Association of Canada. That's the highest designation you can earn as a coach within Canada, and takes a couple of years. I say a couple of years. It takes more than a couple of years. It takes about 4 to 5 years to be able to earn that designation
Wow.
as a coach, and so it's a privilege to be able to say I have that and to be able to utilize that. But the gentlemen that I partner with have very similar sort of coaching backgrounds as well, and we have an understanding, a fairly well-rounded understanding of what coaching looks like in Canada, United States, and Europe, because of our interactions. And like I said, I'm here in Canada. My business partner lives in the States, but he grew up in Europe, in England, and played professionally in England as well. And so we have a fairly good understanding of what sports structure looks like in the sort of three major areas. And what we're trying to do is not overlap what is already existing for coach and athlete education, but to fill in the gaps. So an example that I like to give for people is my very first collegiate coaching job as a soccer coach. I was living in Manitoba. I got hired for a job in Northern Alberta. I arrived into the position, and I find out that I've been hired for the position to fill for a coach who passed away on the field training the team. He was literally in a practice, had a blood clot that moved in his leg, and passed away on the field. And that was my very first collegiate coaching job that I came into. Again, from a psychology perspective, nobody had taught me how to deal with a team of 20 collegiate female players who were processing the loss of a coach,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And I'm like, what do I do, right? So I have now, after spending a lot of time both in practice and in theory, we try to provide people with the opportunities to say, hey, I'm not the only person who's ever had a teammate pass away or dealt with a team who's had a teammate pass away, right? But what does the research say, and what does this look like in actual practice to be able to implement this in a way that's going to be beneficial for everybody involved? And so we try to fill in some of those kind of gaps. We do stuff on like goal setting and mental preparation. I put together a little PDF document that's on the website. It's called How to Ace Your First Disc Golf Event. And the idea behind it is that it's sort of a play on words, but the idea is that I wish it was stuff that somebody had told me before I showed up to my first event, like make sure you bring a dry pair of socks. And so it's about I think it's like a 13-page PDF document. It's a free download on our website, just for people to be able to click on and say, oh man, this is great. Like this is, again, we're trying to push out content for both coaches and athletes. Some of it is free content, some of it is paid content, but the idea is to try to fill in some of those gaps that we see existing in not just disc golf, but in other sports as well, or just general things that coaches and athletes would be interested. Like I said, goal setting and mental toughness are two of the ones that are sort of more holistic, that can apply across a variety of different sports, right? So,
Sure, absolutely.
yeah.
So, taking your education, your experience, and your passion for disc golf, how are you combining those three things to change the face of disc golf? I know you're a member of the Canadian Disc Golf Association and you've run for the PDGA board. What do you see that where's Mark Oxer going to make his mark on this sport to help grow it?
That's a really good question. So, like I said, I did run for a board position in the previous election, and my primary piece was to just try to be able to how do I explain this? Maybe a little bit of a decentralization of leadership, and talking about it building up from that coach and athlete development perspective. So within Canada, as an example, within Canada, we have what's called the long-term athlete development model, and a lot of sports have that. In the United States, it might be worded something different, but that's a pretty standard format that's utilized across a lot of countries. And so what we're looking at doing is to bring something like that into disc golf. So what does it look like if an athlete wants to be a recreational athlete? Does it look like if an athlete wants to be a competitive athlete? What does it look like if a coach wants to be a recreational coach? What does it look like if a coach wants to be a competitive coach? And so there's different streams that fill into that. And so what I'm really passionate about doing is being able to try to help create the content for those pieces, and then trying to be able to connect to the appropriate organizations, whether that be some disc golf entities, disc golf manufacturers, or disc golf associations, to be able to try to disseminate that information out in a meaningful way, so that ultimately the sport can grow, so that people, both coaches and athletes, are getting the best possible information that they can, and then being able to go out and have the best possible time that they can, right? So that's how I'm trying to contribute in my own little way. I mean, aside from that, I love taking new players out on the course, and just being able to introduce them to the game. Because like you said, that first time that they get that throw and it goes the way they want it to, it's like, oh, I'm coming back.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Have you talked to Zoe at Uplay, or
again, just briefly, there's been a couple text messages back and forth, I think on Instagram with Zoe and myself. And so I don't want to step on her toes, because I think what we're doing is different.
Okay.
She's really doing a lot with the youth programming, and like getting into schools and sort of like and working that way. And I think what she's doing is great for the sport and growing it. Where I'm trying to do it is a little bit differently, is more focusing on sort of the coaches piece is part of it. So what does it look like if a phys ed teacher wants to teach disc golf? What does that phys ed teacher need to know to be able to teach disc golf, right? And even beyond that piece, what does the person who's teaching the phys ed teacher need to know, right? Mm-hmm. So like, I'm only one person, but if I could have 50 people like myself that are going out across Canada and educating groups of phys ed teachers across the country, now we're going to have even more going on, right? And so I actually just had a conversation with a gentleman here in Alberta. His name is Frisbee Rob. I'm not sure if you've heard of him or not.
I've heard that name, but I can't remember where. So
Frisbee Rob, he holds, I might get this wrong, but I think he holds 6 Guinness records, disc related Guinness records, for like distance record, max time aloft, a whole bunch of different things that he has. I think he's a chair for WFDF, which is the World Flying Disc Federation.
I probably heard it from Scott Stokely or read it in his book.
It's possible.
He has that broad spectrum of knowledge of different people for, like, all of those different Frisbee things. Anyways, sorry, go ahead.
So anyways, Frisbee Rob and I actually were talking yesterday, because he does a lot of going to school. So he goes into a lot of schools. That's basically his full-time gig, is going to schools and teaching disc sport, not just disc golf, but he teaches ultimate, he teaches can jam, teaches disc golf, teaches freestyle, teaches like the skills like max time aloft, all that kind of stuff. Just wants to get kids throwing a disc, because there's so much that they can do if they pick up a disc. There's ultimate, like there's so many different avenues that they can choose. You just got to get the disc in their hand. And so Rob and I were actually talking yesterday about how we can multiply that. So it's not just Rob always going to the school, because Rob can only show up to one school or maybe 2 schools on a day, right? But how now can we multiply this so there is people in multiple different provinces, multiple different cities on the same day, sort of getting out that same information? And so we're trying to figure out what that process looks like as well. So yeah, I'm sure it's similar to some of the challenges that Zoe's facing with what she's doing with Uplay as well, and just trying to she can only be where she is, but then the opportunity to be able to multiply that out so other people can do it. But a little bit of a quality control piece to make sure it sort of looks and feels the same as well,
So what
right?
you're
So,
talking about is development of standards. That's what it
oh,
sounds like, a development of standards of coaching um, players and instruction.
yeah, that's definitely part of it. Yeah, that's where I've spent a lot of my world, and I'm really excited about. There's opportunities right now that I'm working on within Canada here for development of disc golf as a collegiate sport. And so I know that it happens in the US, that there is like a sort of a collegiate championship that happens, um, but it's not happening really in Canada right now. COVID has really facilitated that opportunity to be able to grow that sport in collegiate environments. And so that's really exciting. And so that's where I've spent a lot of my years, both as a coach and as an administrator. So I understand that world quite significantly. And so I'm looking at how we can grow the sport at the collegiate level, and then sort of maybe have it look like what other sports look like, where you have sort of clubs, then you'd have collegiate, and then that professional sort of stream, and sort of having somebody progress through if that was a route that they chose to go, right?
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah, I've never even thought about that. Yeah. Yeah, I could be 100% wrong, and you college guys, let me know, and guys and girls, let me know down below how, if you're involved in a college program, how that looks. Let me know in the notes for the show. But my assumption would always be that it would be some kind of club. Maybe some schools give credits for it, but I'm not, as a, just a recreational a credit. But I'm not sure how that even works here in the States. But that would be definitely
yes.
interesting for that sort of progression. I know a lot of the professional players, or some of the professional players anyways, went through college and went pro after college, after being involved in, you know, collegiate style disc golf. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it just, I mean, in the States more so than Canada, there's access to high level coaches, high level equipment, team trainings, and like just opportunity to maybe have access to even biomechanical analysis and that type of stuff. But for the most part, way it would work in Canada is that it would start as a club within the school. And then once that's sort of shown that it's successful, it would be able to move to an application to the league. So there's different leagues in the different regions, and you can apply to have it as a exhibition sort of type sport. That's not the exact term, but that's the best way people would probably understand it within this, to see if it would be approved or not. And then once it was successful, because you need a minimum of 3 schools participating in it as well. And then once that's successful, it can be brought on as a full sport within the league. And then if you actually have 3 provinces, so if we were able to say get Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, each having 3 different schools participating, we could actually have a national championship for it. Now, and that's within the Canadian sports structure within colleges and universities. It doesn't take away from the fact that we could still have a collegiate national championship run through sort of like a PDGA type of collegiate national championship for Canada. So there is still options for it to happen. And so we're just really trying to see how we can move some of those pieces forward.
What do you think about this? Question just popped into my mind. What do you think about how we view the World Championship here in the States for disc, or how's disc golf, the World Championship disc golf is kind of viewed? Because it's our World Championship looks pretty similar to every other tournament there
Yeah.
is on, the Pro Tour.
So, so maybe this is me being Canadian. I struggle a little bit with it being called the World Championship with so few international participants, especially in the last couple of years. I know that there has been international participants in the last prior to that, especially coming over from Finland and what have you. But so I've likened this to, as an example, when a team wins a Super Bowl and they call themselves the world champions. And I'm like, well,
yeah.
Are you really the world champions? Because like Canada has its own football league and we didn't play against you. So how do we know, I mean, I'm not kidding. Like the teams in the NFL would crush teams in the NFL. It's not even a question. But there was no sort of world championship that hurt. When you win the World Cup, that's a legitimate, you won, like you beat other nations to say you're a world champion, right? And so
Right.
I guess for me, that would be part of it, is that I'd really like to see that world championships be more international, and whether that be meaning that it's played more internationally as well, because that would be something that I would have sort of advocated within the PDJ as well, for more international events. So we're having things like the Disc Golf Pro Tour, and I understand why it primarily happens in the United States. And I've heard rumblings that there might be events in other nations coming in the future. But if we're really trying to crown somebody and call them a world champion, then we really need to engage it from a world perspective, would be part of what I would say, to make it sort of truly like a world championship. And that doesn't mean that the event that as it is right now isn't a world championship. I'm just saying I'd like to really see a way of stepping up that international participation piece of it. So
Sure. I just thought, since, you being Canadian and, so into coaching and athletics that you might have some input. I never even really thought too much about it. But now that you say, even the Pro Tour just mainly taking place here, I can totally see with the growth of the sport moving into a world tour situation. I mean, because
yeah, for sure.
our players are already playing in Europe and Finland and Sweden. But the objective is to get some of those world players into the States too. And I've talked to some Swedish players and some Finnish players who say that's a bit more of a challenge than to get your American players over here, just because of money. I mean,
Yeah,
when we have
absolutely.
players like Paul Macbeth who are making $10 million a year, it's more feasible to get him over to Sweden to play as his job. But some of the people in
Yeah,
Sweden who might be at the same skill level or very similar, to get them over to America is a whole different task.
absolutely. Yeah. And I understand that that's part of the growth of the sport. And I don't, so in everything that I've said, I'm not trying to slight anybody or the way it's been done in the past.
No, no, no.
It's part of the growth of the sport, that as the sport is growing, to really try to make it that international piece, right? And like to make it exciting. Part of me would be interested to see if there would be a way to include like a team concept to it at all. So like, could you have like these 4 players, like maybe 2 guys, 2 girls from Canada, and then same thing from the other nations, and like then say, hey, this is how Team Germany did. The like Simon finished, I don't know, depending on if
Right.
he wants to be a Canadian or a German.
Right.
Where they finished, and so maybe like, and then just see how that would be an interesting way to do it as well, right?
Oh
So
yeah, that would.
I think that there are options for it.
Oh yeah, you just need to brainstorm that stuff and be prepared for when we have a chance. Because I mean, we're definitely moving in that situation. So conversations like this hopefully kind of put some ideas out there in the ether to move things like that along.
So
I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I think the direction that disc golf is going to go, and if it doesn't, it's absolutely ridiculous. These manufacturers sponsoring these players and paying them salaries upwards of $10 million with Paul Macbeth, the manufacturers themselves need to work on hiring coaches specifically for these players.
yeah,
They should not be going out and finding I mean, if they have their own coaches and things like that, but they should be making sure that their players are coached. If they're
yeah,
investing that much money, I don't know how much goes into all that. Maybe you do if they're already doing this, but they ought to have a team of mental, physical, PT,
absolutely.
checking in on these guys' health, because that's a huge investment in like one person.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
mean,
foresee that.
I'm 100% on board with that. I would see that from a team perspective. So I would view it as, say, as example, Team Discraft would hire
Yes,
Mark Oxer, and then I would be the sort of strength conditioning coach,
exactly. That's what
psychological
I mean.
coach, and I would view it as, I'm on the road, I'm traveling with you guys, and like pre-round, you guys need me to get in the elbow and massage and that kind of stuff. I'm doing that. Like if you need to sit down pre-round and be like, hey man, like I'm really struggling with stuff, the relationship that's going on at home, and I need to be able to make sure that I'm focused for my game today. Let's sit down and talk about that. And even from a chaplain perspective, it's not to overstep what Dustin and Hannah are doing, but just to be able to say, hey, you know what, like I'm your team chaplain. If you need to talk to me and you want to have a little bit more of like a more of a depth talk, let's do that, because you need to be able to go out there. Your job, you're getting paid $1 million a year to put a disc in the basket the best you can. You need to have these supplemental pieces. And I mean, like I said, I think I was last night even, we were watching some YouTube videos. My wife and I were watching YouTube videos, and I was like, oh yeah, it was a Paul Macbeth video, his new one that he threw all the tour series discs. So for this year, all the tour series discs, and you can't hear a word he's saying because the wind is so ridiculously bad. And I think it's Hannah that's filming it. And I'm like, how does Team Discmania not have somebody whose sole job is just to follow these people around, and like while they're driving 16 hours between events is in the flipping RV whacking away at the keys, cutting and editing, like doing all this stuff? Like how is that not somebody's, like how, my other question is how has somebody not just approached Discmania and said, hey, I just want to travel with the Pro Tour, and I'm going to make sure that they have this Team Discmania has the best YouTube social media production ever. Like I understand that there is he was just on he was on the Nick and Matt show. I think he's the guy that does this stuff for a Team Discmania, or Discraft. He travels around with them. Jeremy, I think might be his name. And he's sort of like the team dad. I mean, he's a reasonable disc golfer in his own right, but he makes sure that like the players are getting to the events and that their Airbnb is the right place and like this, that, and the other kind of stuff. And yes, that's sort of like a team manager, and you absolutely 100% need a team manager, but that is a totally separate role from like someone, like you said, like someone like myself or Seth or whatever. That is like, we're on the team, we're going to be your chaplain, we're going to be your physio, we're going to be your psychologist, and we are going to, like, if there was an opportunity, man, I'm packing my van and I'm on the Pro Tour with these guys, and I'll gladly do that. Like that's a dream job.
There
right?
has to be a position opening up. I totally see a coaching team. And if it doesn't go that, I don't know what these manufacturers are thinking, paying that much money to put these people out on tour. And not only that, but off season, of course.
Oh man. Yeah. Like
it's not just out on tour, it's off season as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that where I'm like, I'm really trying to, as much as possible, try to drive that bus forward as much as possible. And be like, the majority of what I did as a strength and conditioning coach at the college level was not the strength conditioning that people probably think that happens. So when the athletes arrive on campus, I'm going to do preseason. I'm going to do the testing with them. So when they all show up, we do testing with all the teams and run your T-test and whatever else, bench press, whatever the coach wants to do for their tests. So we run all their tests at the beginning of the season. My primary goal is to work with the athletic therapist to make sure that the athletes stay healthy. Realistically, I am not trying to make athletes bigger, stronger, faster during the season, because that is not going to go well. So I started two things towards the end of my collegiate strength and conditioning career that were phenomenally successful. I started implementing yogas on Thursdays because most of the team played Friday, Saturdays. So I started implementing yoga sessions on Thursdays with all the teams. The athletes absolutely loved it. All of them put it down as one of their favorite things that they did in the strength conditioning training for the season was the yoga that we did on Thursdays. The other thing that we did is I created something called the 100-point. Let me rephrase that. I didn't create a 100-point recovery. I utilized it was created by a guy in Australia named Bird. He created something for, I think it was 2014 Olympics, called the 100-point recovery system. I took what he created and applied it to a collegiate setting. And I said, okay, here is the different modalities for recovery. So we listed them that they were achievable for college athletes. So get 8 hours of sleep, get this amount of much water, make sure you get this much nutrition, make sure you spend like 15 minutes on a foam roller, and every different modality had a different point value attached to it. And I said, if you can, at the end of the week, I want you to accumulate 100 points worth of recovery throughout the week, right? And so what I did was I made two competitions. I made a competition within the team, and I made a competition within the entire athletics department and said, for the individual on the team that gets the most recovery points, you get a prize at the end of the month. For the team within the entire athletics department that gets the most recovery, they also got a bonus from from myself or whatever, from the strength conditioning team, right? And what happened was recovery, which is something that is hugely underutilized, and this goes back, I don't think I've ever seen a disc golfer go through recovery, myself probably included within that. But what happened was, because a recovery is something that is so underutilized, but is probably considered as one of the most beneficial pieces for your performance in your next piece. So like recovery now is going to be the biggest contributing factor to your performance in the next event, right? Mm-hmm. And so what ended up happening was, because there was that tiny little piece of competition, and because there was a quantifiable piece, because a lot of times athletes are just told, go roll 15 minutes on the foam roller, go ride a bike for 15 minutes, but there's no quantifiable information attached to it. They're like, well, I rode the bike 15 minutes, but so what? But because they say, hey, I rode the bike 15 minutes and I got 15 recovery points for the week, right? Mm-hmm. It so ridiculously, like, I've never seen anything this dramatically change in a collegiate strength conditioning program or any sort of collegiate program ever. It so drastically changed the recovery mentality of the entire athletics department that we went for the 2 seasons that we did this were the 2 least injury prone seasons that we'd ever had for the school.
Yeah. And that's a great point, you know, in the disc in the disc golf realm too, is you're paying these players X amount of money and you don't want them going out there and throwing their elbow out or their shoulder out and getting jacked up.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Do I even talk about the physiology of what some of the diet is like when you're on the road like this, or like finishing a round and then like you got to drive 16 hours to get to your next event? Like, do you want to start talking about the physiology of what's happening with your blood and what's happening? Like, you need to like your muscles tightening, sitting in this position, what's happening to your low back, like all these things. Like, let's really be honest about this stuff. Like it's amazing what's happening on tour. Like you're seeing guys like Ezra throw a raptor friggin' 500 feet and you're like, what this is mind blowing.
Right.
But part of me still goes, but this could be even crazier if there was some of these other pieces in place. Right. And when you said, like, now the manufacturers are paying guys hundreds or millions of dollars to be able to play a year. Well, yeah,
it's a huge investment.
Absolutely. So maybe this is for me, like maybe this is a takeaway for me, is to approach Discmania and say, hey, can I be on the road with Discmania as your kind of like guy?
Stranger things have really stranger things have happened, and you got ties in there, and I've watched them happen on this podcast over the past, however many years. And all I ask is, hey, bring me with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's look at the story. If you ever get a chance to, the story of the I'm going to say strength conditioning coach, fitness trainer that traveled with you too. That's literally how it started. He wrote them a letter and said, hey, this is who I am. I don't want to get paid. I just want to come on the road and be your sort of like fitness trainer, physio with you for you, the band U2. They said, yep. And he traveled with them for years.
That's awesome.
And it was just like the simple ask.
Position.
Absolutely.
So Mark, you have a lot of different affiliations and it sounds like they're growing every day. You've got public ones and secret ones. I'd like to talk to you about some of the public ones and see if you have any other ones that you'd like to talk about. Let's start with Disc Golf Park. How are you affiliated with Disc Golf Park, and what are you doing with them?
Yeah, so it took a few months. There was 6 of us across Canada that worked together to build a relationship with Disc Golf Park, to really connect with them to bring Disc Golf Park to Canada. So when we first started our conversations with them, there was only one Disc Golf Park course in Canada, and that was in the northern part of Canada. And so we just said, like, we have a team of people, a network of people who are passionate about disc golf, passionate about building courses and connecting communities. And we really appreciate and value the brand that Disc Golf Park has and sort of the standard that it has. So When you go to a disc golf park course, it kind of always has that same look, feel, smell, taste to it, right? Like you're going to get that turf tee pad, you're going to get that same sign, you're going to get the nice sign at the course entry, and you're going to get a disc golf park basket for it to be deemed a disc golf park course. So those are the main sort of pieces. That doesn't mean that you can't have just disc golf park baskets in a regular sort of course, but it's not, that wouldn't be deemed an official sort of disc golf park course.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is to connect with as many communities as possible to be able to build, sort of bring that premier disc golf experience to their community, so that when people say, oh, hey, I'm going to go to play this course, and they know it's a disc golf park course, they know what kind of tee pad signage, baskets they're kind of going to be getting. There's a general sort of piece to it. And so the 6 of us came together to deal with the different regions of Canada. And they're then now working. We work really collectively. We talk almost daily on a chat group that we have. We have bi-weekly phone calls with each other, and are really just trying to work hard at connecting with communities to be able to bring a really positive disc golf experience to them. And so it's been good. It's been challenging because getting baskets right now is tough. I
can imagine.
Talk to any manufacturer, and trying to get baskets right now is a bit of a challenge, but that's a good problem, right? So it's exciting to be able to be part of that. So,
well, yeah. And then when you add in COVID and everything, the price of everything, all building materials is up, and then manufacturing across the board in disc golf. A combination of the whole COVID situation with the increase, the natural increase that disc golf would have had without COVID, and then the added increase because of COVID, everybody getting outside and having to do something, during the past year. So yeah, I can totally see having, slowing the getting of baskets and things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Discs are the same thing, right? So like manufacturers can't print discs and stamp them fast enough, essentially, right? So yeah, that's been the connection to Disc Golf Park. As part of that, because Discmania is their sort of sister company or brother company or affiliate company, however you want to word that. I've been switched over. I was with Prodigy for the past 2 years, and I switched over to Discmania. That probably comes as part of, you mentioned a very passionate person, but I think for me that also ties to maybe some of the collegiate experience that I've had. Like if I'm blue and white, I'm blue and white, right? So if I'm part of Team Disc Golf Park and Discmania is the affiliated sort of company for discs, then that's what I move towards. It feels strange for me to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be installing Disc Golf Park baskets, but I'm going to be throwing this brand of disc over here that's totally not related. And for me, that just feels weird. Not that, other people on the team are doing that, and there's no issue with that at all. For me, that's just not, that for me, that connects just in sort of a straight line to be able to go, no, if I'm blue and white, I'm blue and white. And that's just the way I drive kind of forward.
It's almost sort of a simplification too, just makes life easier.
Absolutely.
It's a weird thing, but I understand, but yeah, like me, I don't, obviously there are arguments for mixed bag, and, and I have mixed bags. I have bags that are just Discmania and Innova, and, I don't know. It just simplifies. I know exactly what my leopard's going to do. I know, and that's, what do I do when it stops doing it? I just get another leopard. So I like to try out other discs, and I'm really liking AGL, who I had on the show. I'm really liking some of their stuff and might create a bag for them. But it's a simplification process for me. Anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's one of the pieces that I've been connected with as far as that piece. We touched briefly on some of the educational stuff that I've hopefully being able to work through. I do have some other projects that are in the hopper. One that I'm really excited about. Unfortunately, I can't talk too much about it because of a non-disclosure agreement, but it would be a very revolutionary item. Is that the best way to describe it?
Technology
a very revolutionary
item?
technology item. For the sport, that I am working with someone to be able to hopefully be able to manufacture and to be able to produce. And so we're just trying to sort of see if we can work through some of those details, but really excited about that. So just trying to be able to look at the sport in a variety of different ways and see where there's opportunities or where there's gaps, and just be able to essentially be able to try to make the sport more accessible or more enjoyable, or a better experience for anybody who's interested in participating in it, right? So yeah.
Right. And you have some other affiliations. Eagles Wings is another one.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about them? Tell us about
Yeah,
Eagles Wings.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So most people who are listening to this are probably familiar with Eagles Wings, as they run the chapels for the events on the Pro Tour. And so Dustin and Hannah are the two main people sort of that are driving that, but there's a lot of other people that are connected to the organization that are helping out in a variety of different ways as well. But people would probably be most familiar with Dustin and Hannah Leatherman, both as players, but then also probably because they've maybe seen them or heard about them at the events as well. But they run the chapels for the Pro Tour and some of the other majors. And so Eagles Wings is a faith-based organization that connects through people to faith-based organization that connects to people through the sport of disc golf. And that's primarily what it is. So my role within it is I'm an ambassador for Eagles Wings in Canada. And so what I try to do is sort of similar to what the Eagles Wings would do at a bigger picture piece. So when I'm playing in different events, I try to contact the tournament director. Once I've made my registration, I contact the tournament director and say, hey, this is who I am. I'm an ambassador with Eagles Wings. If you want to go check out the website, you can see me here. This is my profile, who I am, whatever. I'd be interested in connecting with the players of your event, just to let them know if they wanted to get together for a sort of like a chapel type time or a prayer type time, or if they've had things that they maybe would want me to pray for them, or just be able to connect with them. I will be at the event. Would you be okay if I shared that on the event social media page?
Wow.
And most tournament directors are pretty good with it and say, yes, I don't care. A lot of them are actually like, oh, cool, we can have a chapel now. It looks like the big guys do, right? And so
wow.
they get excited about it from that perspective. So
that is so cool. That is something that I think that people never see and would be neat for people to see. You know, I'm very open about my faith in my books, but you know, being a Christian, and also that's how I started playing disc golf with, you know, youth group. You know, from when I was a kid, I was, you know, church and youth group, and I think that's really neat. I've been watching Eagles Wings, and I've been thinking about having somebody, a representative, come on the podcast, and that just happened to be an offshoot of what you're doing. So I wanted to talk to you about that. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah. So I carry, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the pictures of my van on social media,
yes.
But I got my van wrapped. And so in my van, I actually keep a stack of disc golf devotionals. And so if I have an opportunity to connect with someone, or if somebody's interested, I can share that devotional with them as well. So that's something that Eagles Wings is able to provide as a resource as well. So now if I tie that into some of the other conversations we've had, I've had conversations with some of the Eagles Wings leadership about, again, different ways that we can, I don't want to use that word franchise, but different ways that other people can do the same thing, so that they can learn from the experiences that I've had, or from the experiences that Dustin has had, and say, okay, if you're going to a C-tier event in rural whatever, here's what seemed to work when you're trying to contact tournament directors. If you're trying to reach an A-tier event and want to run an event like a chapel there, here's maybe how you'd want to word it, or how you want to connect with that tournament director, right? And so just trying to put together almost like a best practices to be able to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that it has to, like, with all of these things that I'm talking about, I'm not trying to put boxes, because I think if anybody was just to ever describe me, the last thing that somebody would describe me as being in a box. And so I'm not trying to put other people into a box, or a way of doing things in a box, but just trying to give people a guide to be able to say, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. Maybe this will work for you, maybe it won't, but at least maybe here's some options that you can try. And so that people aren't just coming on and be like, hey, I'd like to be an ambassador with Eagles Wings. We go, great. And then they get out there and they're like, they end up like me as a personal trainer. Somebody comes up to them and says, and they're like, I wasn't ready for this.
Streamline would be a good word for what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
Streamline
absolutely.
things. Help
Yeah.
people by streamlining. You should call yourself disc golf deacons. I like that. Disc golf deacons. Well, right on. And you're also affiliated with Flight Co.
Yes. So so that's a fun one too, because um, getting connected with them, I found out that the owner is also interested in Settlers of Catan.
We have to talk about that too, but please continue.
So yeah, so I've actually I sent him a copy of my book. And so we've had some banter back and forth about Settlers of Catan as well. But yeah, just wanting to be able to, again, I really appreciate what they're doing with sort of that outdoor apparel and really trying to connect within
Yeah, I like
the
their
community
designs a
that
whole
way.
lot. They're really cool.
Yeah, they have some, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying they were really cool. I love their designs.
Yeah, really cool designs. And so again, just being able to, he was kind of starting up and wanting to get more into the sport, and just he connected with me probably, I think this is my second season with him now, I guess. But primarily, again, I'm not a great disc golfer, and I know that's some of the things that people have chirped me about online, being like, why am I going to learn about coaching athletes from you when you're an 876 currently 876 rated disc golfer? And I was like, my ability to throw a disc is not correlated to my ability to help you become a better athlete yourself. I mean, it's crazy where if you were to go look at my round ratings, I've shot everything from like a 950 to like an 816. And some of them are on the same event. And I'm just like, what are you doing? So I struggle with the consistency piece somehow. Anyways, another story, but
I'm right there with
connected.
you. I have terrible ranks. I don't like to run into people on the disc golf course because I'm like, yeah, I wrote this book and I just hit 12 trees, and it's all good. You know, you got good days, you got bad days. As long as you're having fun, it's all good.
Absolutely. I mean, I played today, and I think I told you at the start of the thing, like the winds were like 50 to 70, I'll say, kilometers per hour. And I'll let some of your guests figure out the conversion for that.
Do you know what's really funny? I'm just going to inject a really a quick story in here because I know my buddy's going to be listening to this. So I wrote about it in the beginning of, this is my newest book, Disc Golf Strategies and Tactics. And I wrote about, what the impetus of deciding to write this book. And it was playing with a buddy of mine named Tommy. And Tommy has been whooping me for like 3 years. Now, I taught Tommy how to play, and I created a monster because he's super competitive and loves to just talk trash the entire time. It doesn't matter. I love playing with him, but I told him at one point, I said, I'm going to write a book called Beating Tommy Brosom. And that's what it's going to be called. That sort of became this, because nobody would know Tommy Brosom. So it sort of became this. But anyway, so when I beat Tommy Brosom, it's because of high winds. Tommy, you can't play in wind. And he always tells me, he always tells me, it takes an act of God for you to beat me. Yeah, well, every dog has its day.
Yeah, absolutely. So go ahead. No, sorry.
No, sorry. I just say it when you got to talking about wind, I'm like, oh, I need to go up there and play.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's a joke that we kind of have up here. Like I was playing with a guy here. That's the guy I played with today. It's home course. And he was like, that's life in Alberta. Today could be summer. Tomorrow could be winter. Today could be like the next day after could be like hurricane winds. Like the next day could be rain, and then it could be summer again. Then it could be winter again. Like you get all 4 seasons in one day.
Don't like the weather. Wait 5 minutes. That's our saying in Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as you were talking to, one of the stories in your book, and the story that I can't remember it exactly, but the story that ends with the person's anonymous name being Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved that. Loved the way you did that. Loved that. Absolutely loved it.
Call me Batman.
Yeah. Oh man. Absolutely loved it. Well played. I love it.
That's in Discs and Zen. It's also in the Complete Zen Disc Golf. But yeah, it's a conversation between me and I said just an anonymous friend named Bruce W. And Bruce W. and I go back and forth. At the end of the story, he says, thanks for the conversation. And he goes, you're not going to put this in your next book, are you? And I say, well, if you don't want me to. He goes, no, go ahead and put it in there. Just do me a favor. Don't use my real name. Okay. What do you want me to use? Call me Batman.
Yeah, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Well played.
Great.
That was great. So I'm looking forward to your new book. I'm really excited about being able to check that out.
Yeah, every book I say this is the best one, but Zen and the Art of Disc Golf just kind of eclipses everything for everybody, and I've come to understand that and accept it.
So
It's the
okay, so I'm
classic.
gonna can I put a question back to you?
Yeah.
So
Can I defer my
so
answer? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
there's two main pieces that stick to me from your book. The stare at the chain link and always put your bag down. Were the two pieces. And I guess the question that would be back to you as the author, what would be the one or two or pieces that would be like your pieces that really stick with you?
In Zen and the Art of Disc Golf,
Yeah.
as far as, all right, what are the pieces that I think about on a regular basis? Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
I
Yeah.
definitely always think about leaving your baggage behind, and setting your bag down before you make your shot, and just how that I want to say that was one of the first philosophies that really struck me when I was out on the course, because I watched it happen all the time. Guys just walk up to their disc and they don't set their bag down and they throw and they just miss. And I just got that whole idea of bag and baggage, that we just make so many misses in life because we're not able to drop our baggage. And that's a human thing.
Yeah.
But my argument for that is a lot of times we don't even know we're carrying baggage that we're carrying. And I really think some sort of mindfulness practice helps us assess and locate that as we're doing that. Let's see, another.
You don't have to give two, but I mean, I just was curious just for the author,
I
like,
think about
because
that
people
all the
always
time.
ask me that about two, right? They're always like, what's the like one thing, right? So
Yeah, I do think about that all the time. One of the things that I think people need to understand about Zen and the Art of Disc Golf, and any book like that, is that none of us are perfect. And just because, for example, I've written about finding that piece on the course, doesn't mean that I don't get angry on holes. Doesn't mean that, but it's trying to find a way, just like you do, to streamline, to find a set of standards and saying, okay, and to recognize, because a lot of people don't even recognize their own emotions when they're occurring in their lives. And I think any sort of sports and sporting events that really put you in the moment and they make you mindful, they give you sort of that that flow state, that it gives you the ability to access and understand and name what's going on, so that when you walk off that sport, you're able to do it better in your life. And I think that's the gist of Zen and the Art of Disc Golf. Definitely.
love it. I mean, I'm gonna try to prevent this, but I feel like we could go down a whole tangent of that whole flow state piece. Like I don't I
Csikszentmihalyi.
mean, you probably yeah.
There's 1,000 ways to say that name.
Yeah, there is. But I absolutely love it. I saw, if you saw, so we briefly touched on the fact that it's a Catan book, but the other book that I did was called Preparing for Lifting Performance.
Right.
I specifically directed it towards lifting because that's where I've had a lot of experience. And I feel like that there was a little bit of a gap in the market for that. I've had some really good feedback from some coaches who've had the chance to read it. But in that, I do talk about flow state, and then I actually talk about something called the challenge point framework as well, and really understanding how people learn. But like what you said, people being aware of their emotions is something that's really, really important. A story that I share in the preparing for performance book is my wife has a really sort of intense job. She's a nurse on a helicopter for trauma patients.
Gotcha.
And they sort of have borrowed a mantra from military, where it's, you don't rise to the occasion, but you sink to your level, you sink to your foundations, right? So the idea being that, so as an example, she could get her work is similar to like a firefighter, where she goes to the base. If the tones go off, they get in the helicopter and they're dispatched to an accident. And they only get dispatched if other people are like, this is a huge mess and we need really really professionally, properly trained people to be able to help because the situation's a complete mess, right?
Right.
And so the tones go off, they get in the helicopter and they fly, right? And so the idea behind it is that when she lands at a scene and there's multiple vehicle accidents, multiple patients, it's dark, it's minus 20 degrees in Celsius in Canada in the wintertime, there's lights flashing and sirens going and everything else, you're all of a sudden going to be like, sweet, now I'm going to rise to the occasion. I'm going to be amazing, right? What's going to happen is psychology shows that you actually start to get more and more tunnel vision, right?
Sure. Yep.
And so what her organization does is they intentionally push people to sort of their limit of their bandwidth. So like they run simulators all the time and they push people to their bandwidth and they go, okay, perfect. That's where you failed. Awesome. Now we know where your bandwidth limit is. Let's see if we can expand that bandwidth limit a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further, so that when you arrive on that scene and it's complete chaos, you're able to go, okay. And your basic foundation is so high that you can process that situation.
Yeah, that's what
right?
I was going to say. You raise your foundation.
Absolutely.
Kind of like when you're in a flood
right?
zone, you got to raise your foundation. And I don't know if did you know I was a medic firefighter?
I didn't know that. I didn't know
so
that.
I can totally identify with what you're saying.
Okay,
when
perfect.
the stress hits, you've got to be able to not only handle the stress, but yeah, it does things to your brain and you forget things.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so the idea of being able to bring something like that to the sport of disc golf, right, where you get to these situations, and now it'd be really fun to be able to have some of these conversations with some elite players and say like, hey, you're on the 18th green and this is a putt for you to win the event, right? How much training? And I know that there is players, like I've seen some of the vlogs and stuff that Eagle does. And so I know he intentionally invests some time in these aspects of the game. And I'm not going to say other players aren't, they maybe just aren't as vocal about it on social media as a guy like Eagle. But I really am interested to like, hey, how can we work together with you to elevate your emotional awareness, like your EQ essentially, right? How can we raise that so that when you get to this situation, you're like, I can do this. And whether it be positive self-talk, whether it be reframing, whether it be parking, whether it be whatever psychological tools are required for you in that moment, they are able to say, I'm going to put my bag down. I'm going to look at this link of chain. And this putt isn't for $10,000. This is the putt with me and my buddies out on the course, and I'm going to be able to make that. If that's the reframe that you need, right? Other people need to reframe it in a different way, right? And so just being able to understand those psychological pieces and then working together but doing it in an intentional way, right? There has to be intentionality behind that. So like I said, when my wife or like even yourself is doing these types of things, you're training, there's intentionality behind your training so that you're essentially bumping yourself up or leveling yourself up every time. So the next time you go to work, the next time you go on shift, you're going to be a better paramedic, nurse, firefighter, whatever it happens to be, right? And so we could do that same thing with disc golfers if we're intentional with that behavior, that we can sort of level them up so that they're able to have a greater emotional intelligence and understanding, and then be able to process that in a positive way, right? So
yeah, dude, I love that. And that's what I love to talk when I do have my pros on. I do love to pick their brain and try to figure out what their routines are, and that sort of thing. You kind of made me think of, because, well, you're big into lifting, you're a lifting coach, powerlifting, CrossFit, all that kind of stuff. As I was telling Seth Muncie, I've been doing strong lift 5x5s. So basically every time I work out, I add 5 extra pounds, depending on the lift. But yeah, like, like say squats. So I'm doing 5 extra pounds every time I do squats. That's raising the foundation. But then also, I was also thinking about, when I go to lower myself on a squat, or a bench press, anything really, when I lower that weight and I know that I'm on my, I'm lowering it, I'm going to have to lift it up. If I think about how heavy it is, I'm done. But if I decide this is light, it just is so much easier. The mind is incredible when it comes to that. So I'm sure that you wrote some of that in your book, but if you think light, man, just squeeze hard. It just feels light.
Oh man, that concept of think light is, I mean, oh man, it's just, there's so many good things that are going off my brain when you're saying that, because it's definitely like, I mean, some of the fun tactics that we've used is an athlete doing a deadlift. we cover the weights with towels or blankets so they can't actually see what's on the bar.
That's
right.
awesome.
And we'll load the bar with odd shaped plates so that if they looked at it and go, oh, that's probably 405, but it's not, because we've loaded it with different, like maybe we've added a bunch of 10s so that it looks like there's more on the bar. It looks like there's less on the bar if we use like 25 kg plates or something, right? So, and then an athlete goes up and they lift it and they're like, oh man, that was good. That didn't feel heavy. And they're like, oh buddy, you just made a PR by 10 pounds. They're like, what?
I love
You're
that.
like,
that's amazing.
So yeah, but just really trying to, I want to say trick your mind, but using your mind to your advantage, right? And using different tricks and tactics to your mental advantage, right? And so, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there was in one of my books I wrote about how to trick yourself into throwing farther. Well, you start playing the long tees. That's the trick. And then when you go back to playing the short tees, you're like, oh, well, I rose to the occasion and didn't even realize that that was going on. Yeah. There's a lot of mental tricks that can help you progress in really anything. Yeah. So let's talk about this Catan thing. We got to talk about, so you are such a multifaceted guy, and I think it'd be an interesting way to kind of start closing out. You were a board game champion at Settlers of Catan with a book written about it.
Yeah.
Zen and the Art of Catan, I believe it's called. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, tell me about that.
So sort of similar in some ways to my disc golf experience. I was introduced to it by a friend. So there was a group of friends that we got together. We played board games on a fairly regular basis. And one of them said, hey, I got this new game we want to try. And we're like, okay. So we tried it and it was like, oh, that's fun. And so we started integrating it into our sort of gameplay. This was in like, oh man, sometime in the late 1990s, early 2000s, this kind of was going on. And then 2005 came around and there was a Canadian championship in Winnipeg. So I was like, well, that's where I live. I might as well go throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. And so I'll say something and that could lead on a whole other tangent. We won't really address necessarily today, but I think that it's interesting when we look at our life from a reflective perspective, that there's been these little moments in time that at the time maybe seemed really insignificant, but that have really changed the trajectory of our lives. And this is what happened to me in 2005. So in 2005, there was a national championship for Settlers of Catan. I only found out about it like a couple of days before the event, and I was like, oh sure. So I showed up at the mall. It was in the mall in Winnipeg, and so I signed my name up, and I was like, I'll play. And my buddies, we all entered. They most of them got knocked out in round robin play, and I made it to the final table with one of my other friends. So there was a 4-player table, final table, and myself, one buddy, and then 2 other players. I won the Canadian championship that year. I think it's the only year that there was a solo Canadian champion, was 2005. And I went to the World Championships in Essen, Germany. So there's a huge board game tournament in Germany called Eschenspiel every year. And it's a humongous convention, absolutely enormous convention. And so the World Championships were held in Germany that year at this convention. And I will admit, at the time, I was probably a little bit out of my league. I got to the tournament with a relatively decent understanding of the game and some of the different tactics, what have you. I do chalk up to my resume that I did beat the longtime reigning German champ in one of my very first games in the tournament. So I was pretty happy with that because the game is made in Germany. And so the German champ is actually somebody who's quite good at the game. And so to be able to beat him in one of my round robin games, I was pretty excited. But I finished middle of the pack at the World Championships. But what that did was that changed the trajectory of my life. I became known as like, you're that Catan guy. And so people would like want to play games with me or like ask me to sign like pieces from their game. And like, it just became this sort of piece that became more and more maybe an identity piece. And then as you sort of get people feeding into that from a psychological perspective, you start to maybe own that a little bit. And I go, oh, mate, yeah, I am good at Catan. And there's that belief aspect now. So I'm starting to level up. I am good at Catan. I do win. I did play at the World Championships. And so when I would sit down at a table, I'd be like, I'm the best player at this table. Everybody else needs to beat me. And I would start having a little bit of a different attitude other than just like, oh, I'm going to try to do my best. No, I started the game knowing I was the best player at the table. and they all had to try to beat me, right? And so that changed how I played, and it gave me more confidence, and like it sort of started propelling things forward. And so I've had the opportunity to play in a lot of tournaments over the years, several by invitation. One of the ones that I'm probably the most proud of is in 2013, I won a Masters Championship, which is an invitation only event that is all previous champions. So if you've been a US champ, like national champion or a Canadian national champion, that sort of thing, or former world participant, those are the players that get invited. It's an invite only. And so I won that event in 2013. And that was an event that I was probably the most proud of winning, because I'm playing against a really high caliber opponents on a regular, for every match that you're playing against is somebody who's been very successful at the game. So to win that, I was pretty proud of that. And yeah, and then so it just kind of has carried on from then. And so I took, so I will say this as well to you. Your book inspired me to finish my book. So what I had done was I'd actually written probably 90% of my Catan book.
What?
And it sat on my computer for 3 years because I had this like fear of failure of like, if I actually publish this, now people can actually read it and go, well, yeah, but you don't know what you're talking about. Why did you say this? Why did you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And so there was this like fear of like, if I actually put this out there, what are people going to say?
Oh, yeah.
And so I read your book.
I still do.
I was like, man.
But you know what?
I hear you.
You know what? Being open about that is freeing. And I joke all the time. I'm like, yeah, I'm not a pro, and I hit a lot of trees, and sometimes I get mad. But hey, I wrote a book, and people seem to like it, and here I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, so I read your book, and I was like, man, I'm like. And I mean that, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way at all. I said, but man, he did this, I can finish my book, right? And so I was like, so then I got back on the computer and I finished my book, and I published it. And it's been a really successful opportunity. I mean, I don't know what the sales are for your book. I'm sure it's probably a lot more than what mine are, but I've really been able to connect into the community. I've had a lot of people send me messages. I actually am doing a podcast on Monday for the podcast called King of Catan. And it's all people who have played in the World Championships. We're on a podcast together and just talking about the game. And so it's been a really awesome opportunity to do that. And so the last 2 weeks, actually, in some of the spare time that I have, I've been constructing another Catan book, not like a version 2, but a very different piece that, again, I think is something that could address a gap in the market that I saw or heard, maybe is a better way of doing it, from all the conversations I've been able to have with these people over the last couple of years since I've published the book. So yeah.
Yeah, your story really cool. Sounds very similar to my story with disc golf, your story with Catan. That's really cool, man. As you were talking, I'm visioning what's that new Netflix show, Queen's Gambit? Yeah. She's playing chess all over. Yeah, that's you, except for it's Catan, right? Pretty much the same story. You're an orphan, and you played Catan with the janitor down in the basement. I don't want to give it all away. Read his book, right? So that brings me to a good point. How can people find out more about you and help you, Mark Oxer, make a difference in this disc golf world?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd absolutely love to connect with people. So the best way to be able for people to do that is to just go to markoxer.com. The majority of my contact information is on there. Some of the resources like my books and some other things that I've produced are on there, available for people as well. But it's got contact information on there. And so if people just maybe want to learn a little bit more about who I am or different things like that, or interested in talking further, whether that be about disc golf, lifting, Catan, or other, the best way that people would be able to get in touch with me would be through that webpage, markoxer.com.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, just learning about you, I'm really excited about it. I'm going to try to bring you on another time, maybe more often. We'll see what happens. There's just so much we can explore together. And I think that'd be fun shows.
Yeah, absolutely. I really thank you for the opportunity. It's been great to connect, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. For more information about Mark, head on over to markoxer.com. I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more of him. For more about Zen Disc Golf, head to zendiscgolf.com. You can learn more about my books, You can see more apparel, hats. I've got hats, I've got sweatshirts. I know it's getting a little bit warmer, but I've got t-shirts. Got all kinds of stuff on zendiscgolf.com. As always, thank you so much for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next time. Jeez. Just got smacked in the head by some carpenter bees.